this fluorescent talk because it's close to nowhere.
If we were dating, you'd be geographically undesirable.
Thank God that's not happening.
Yes, really.
How is the family, by the way?
Everybody's fine. Everybody's doing very well, and basketball season's getting ready to start. And
Viz.
girls hoops.
How are we going to do with Viz? How's
Girls
Viz
hoops.
doing?
They're going to be good. They're going to be fine.
Yeah.
I really like, and I've got some friends, their daughters play at St. Joe, and they just won the volleyball championship for the state. I love girls athletics in high school. It's even my daughters don't play volleyball, and I still went to watch St. Joe and Esiason play.
They're good.
I get a big kick out of it.
They're definitely good. Well, let's talk. Let's start with the Rams and kind of branch out a little bit because at home we watched the Rams, and just an overall look. Does that team? Is there something, the cloud over that team that may never leave until? Unless there's a big house cleaning, or do you think it's just a bad team?
Well, they need some of the good things that come from winning, and the question will be, do they have enough character and enough leadership to realize how many good things come from winning? And if I looked at that team right now, that would be, it's maybe a lack of maturity, a lack of guys that have been there and done it before. It's funny how a team needs something to make it gel, and you never know when that one game will come along that might be the one that, just that match that gets the fire going. But that match hasn't been struck there yet.
You can't pick up the paper or listen to the radio or watch television without the topic of Tony Banks being brought up.
Right.
What's your opinion of Tony Banks?
Well, first of all, I never. The first fallacy is that the quarterback has to be the leader of your football team. Yeah, your quarterback has to be strong, and your quarterback has to be a tough guy, and he has to play week in and week out. But he doesn't have to be the quote-unquote leader of your football team. That guy can come from any position, and it's a position that I've always called a bell cow. Somebody that when he practices like this, it makes everybody else practice at that pace. And when he plays the game at this level, it makes everybody else want to compete at that level. And, I'm not sure the Rams have that guy right now, or if he has, maybe he's just in the process of emerging. That's all we can hope for.
Yeah, at the 3-year mark, in essence, with Tony Banks, although he didn't start the complete season his rookie year, is the growing pains he's still showing. Do you think that's typical? I mean, there are a lot of young guys around the league who are...
Oh, yeah. His performance on the field is not atypical. Let's put it that way. You go over to Kansas City and look at Elvis Gerbach and what's happening over there, and look what's happening with any number of teams around the NFL. Bobby Hoying in Philadelphia and Rodney P. The list is endless unless you're in one of the 8 or 9 cities that really have a rock-solid quarterback. So, yeah, obviously, if you just look at Tony Banks on the field, there's something there. And you think to yourself, maybe there's a guy that could really develop into a top-notch NFL quarterback. Now, off the field, obviously his stunt in Miami was one of the more bizarre things I've ever seen a quarterback do.
It's very odd, but when you talk about, a lot of the fans call in the call-in shows and say the one thing that bothers them the most about this team, obviously Tony Banks and his attitude is one of them, but when they look on the sideline, they say there's too many coaches. It's so specialized, there's so many coaches. Was it like that when you were around? Was there that many coaches? I know the Rams have a huge core of coaches. I mean, they have assistants to assistants on the coaching staff. Was there that many when you played? Or?
No, there weren't that many when I played, but that doesn't mean that what the Rams are doing is all that unusual. There are a number of other teams in the NFL that have staffs as big as the Rams have. Now, there are some teams that get by with less. It's hard to drop this on the coaching staff. The Rams just don't have as many good football players as some of the teams they play, and it's just all I can say is they need to put together a couple of good drafts. They need to put together a couple of good, solid years of signing some quality free agents, and you know what? Then they'll be right in the middle of it. This game's all about personnel. And the Rams haven't drafted all that well. That's been pretty well documented. And let's face it, their record reflects that.
Monday Night Football, you have the new crew now with Boomer Esiason. How's that going?
Well, it's a great view from those seats, as you can tell. It's, we don't have to we don't have to pay the price for bad drafts and everything else. Boomer's working out just fine. He's a likable guy. It's a different role for me because I've gone from being the younger guy in the booth. I was the baby of the broadcast team to now I'm 12 years older than Boomer, so it's a change of pace for me. But he's fun, he's brash, he's topical. The guy was playing quarterback just a year ago in the NFL and playing it very well. I'll tell you what's tough on Boomer, and sometimes it's really not awkward, but we realize this. Of the 10 games that we've probably done so far this year, probably 7 of those games have involved a team where the best quarterback in the stadium was probably standing next to me. Boomer could still play and play well.
And be making large sums of money doing so.
He turned down, several $1 million in Cincinnati, and they wanted him to play and want him to play badly, and I've seen him field a few offers in coaches' meetings so far this year.
We watched the piece, I think, a couple weeks ago where they show the producer and the director, and you don't hear them, right? But obviously you know what's going on in that truck. I mean, this production, obviously it's been on, 29?
29 years.
29 years, and it's just grown. It's like the happening on Monday night for these towns when it comes there. What's that like when you go to these places? I mean, we talked about this off air.
Well, it's a big production.
Yeah.
Kind of like this.
What are you looking at? But it's not as big as this one. But, I mean, we saw all the people in the truck. I thought it was a great piece just to see what goes into it.
It's very interesting, isn't it?
But
we have a traveling group at about 85 people.
That's amazing.
Wow. And the trucks are all custom built just for us on Monday Night Football. And they travel they don't do anything else. They just go from one Monday night game to the next. Like, I know that our main control truck, where our producer and our director sit, that's in excess of $10 million. Just that one truck, custom made. And then every week, they run the miles of cables to, 21 or 22 cameras, and all of our people have been with us. We're the same crew every week, all the way down to the chairs we sit on, the monitors we have. It's all our little traveling circus.
With all the games you've done on Monday Night Football, what's the best game you've ever called on Monday Night Football?
Oh, wow. Some of them, so many of them come to mind for different reasons. I think it was 1994. We were in Denver, and it was Elway, and it was Kansas City, Joe Montana, right at the end of his career. And we knew when we were watching it that, it was probably the last 2 times that these two were ever going to be on the field together. We did a game at the Kingdome against where Seattle against the Raiders, and Bo Jackson had the monster night, like 220-some yards running.
Ran over Brian Bosworth.
And then he plugged Brian Bosworth right on the goal line. And performances like that are some of the things that really stick in my mind. Getting a chance, like later this year, we're towards the end of our season, we've got Denver playing in Miami, the next to the last game of the season. There's John Elway and Dan Marino on the field. Very seldom have they played against one another, and that chances are this is the last time we're going to see those two together.
So that's always interesting, and it's been an interesting football season too. I mean, with Green Bay coming back to the pack a little bit, Kansas City with their problems at quarterback, considered a favorite coming into the season. I mean, Minnesota establishing themselves as a power. I mean, this has been kind of a different year. And
somehow you've got like the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah.
Let's face it. If you stopped right now, Dan Reeves would have to be Coach of the Year in the NFL. And Atlanta, what are they, 7-2, I think? It's an astounding start for that franchise. And the hot topic and the hot story this year, and as long as they stay this way, Denver's making a run at Miami's 1972 undefeated season. Now that's a little harder to do now. That was a 14-game season back then, and now it's a 16-game season.
And that would make things all the more interesting in Miami then, too, wouldn't it?
Well, I hate to even jinx it because it's almost impossible for them to be undefeated going into that game. But Don Shula will tell you that of all of his accomplishments, having that undefeated team is by far and away number one. And the last team to really make a serious run at going undefeated was the '85 Bears. And their one loss in that season was to the Miami Dolphins, and on a Monday night. And I can tell you that if we go to Miami with the Dolphins having to play an undefeated Denver team, it'll be one of the greatest spectacles ever on Monday night, because Don Shula will have every living member of that 72 team on the sidelines, and they'll be sticking pins in John Elway dolls. They'll be cutting the heads off of Shannon Sharp dolls. It'd be some scene.
What do you think of the season so far? Halfway through, kind of right now is when you kind of know who the contenders are and who the pretenders were. What do you think of the season so far? Has it been a good season? Is this kind of the average season? A lot of the teams, like we said, Atlanta, didn't expect them to be there, but Minnesota's had a great start and Denver's had a great start. We're pretty much looking at those two to go pretty far.
Yeah, and we've had some really fascinating stories, I think. A lot of them revolving around old quarterbacks. Guys getting a second chance, Vinny Testaverde and Randall Cunningham and Doug Flutie. And it illustrates, I think, some of the problems that we're having here in St. Louis with Tony Banks. These old guys are still getting a shot and are still getting playing time because the game has become so complicated defensively. And defenses have become so adept at hiding coverages and the zone blitz and coming at quarterbacks from so many different directions. It has become unbelievably difficult to play quarterback in the NFL. You know, it's no fluke these old guys are playing. These old guys are playing because they know how to play, and the kids, by and large, are just really struggling. It's a concern. You know, half the teams in this league don't have a quarterback that can play, and that makes for boring football. It does. You know, fans don't want to see incomplete pass after incomplete pass and sack after sack because the quarterback has nowhere to go with the ball. They like to see competent football.
With another hot topic of conversation in football circles recently has been the recently published book, Pros and Cons. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but...
Well, I haven't read it. I've certainly read all the reviews.
Yeah, in essence, the thesis of the book is that there are one in five players in the NFL are charged with a serious crime, not just you know, shoplifting or drinking beer when you're a kid, but violent, serious crimes. Do you think that that's an accurate study? And if so, how much of a departure is that from how things were in your playing days?
Well, I don't know what, as I understand it, there are like 2,000 players during the course of a year that will draw a paycheck in the National Football League. I believe he took like 500 players and did a study of those 500 and pulled those percentages out of there. Like, you got like 125 out of the 500 had some arrest in their background. I don't know how that compares to general society. I don't think that the attention is bad if the result is good. In other words, if there is if there's more of a concentration on staying clean and staying out of trouble, then that's good. Is it any worse than it's ever been? I don't think so. I think a lot of guys got in trouble 20 or 30 years ago, and you want to know what? More often than not, they just got let go. Nobody gets let go now.
Are the attitudes, I mean, the attitudes right now are, I mean, obviously the media was covering it a lot more now with Michael Irvin and those kind of stories.
Right, there's no place to hide anymore.
Right. But, you know, the attitudes, it seems like, I mean, and we're even talking all sports right now, it seems like the attitudes of the players are a lot different. Obviously, the money has something to do with that, but do you think there's I mean, look, Wilbert Montgomery came out last week and said these guys aren't even opening their playbooks. 10 guys maybe open their playbooks. I mean, was that the same back in the 70s when you played with the Cardinals, or were there guys?
We had at least a dozen or so that opened their playbook. We might have had 15 maybe. We had, you know, Conrad couldn't even read. So.
That's probably true.
You know, what Wilbert said was, I understand why he said it. Frustration at losing is a terrible thing, and you understand why people react that way. I never understood when I played how people could make mental errors playing the game. You know, you don't have to carry a 3-point grade point average. You don't have to go to chemistry class. You don't have to go to study hall. All you're paid to do is to play football and know what you're doing. And to see people who fall asleep in meetings, to see people who practice all week to do a certain thing and then the game comes along and they don't do it, I could never coach. I could never coach because I'd be on top of some of these people, and I'd have my hands around their throat choking them. I would. Part of coaching, I think, is having to deal with the frustration of realizing sometimes that it matters a whole lot more to you than it does to some of the people you're coaching. That would irritate me to death.
You mentioned Conrad Dobler and that the offensive line of the 70s that you were a part of, the best that's ever played in this town, and really the foundation of what was the most successful football we've ever had in this town.
Yeah.
But certainly an interesting cast of characters on that offensive line, too.
And we were characters with character. We were, and that's one of the things when you look back, it's frustrating to us because we have to live the rest of our lives knowing how much talent we had here, and we never won a playoff game or went to a Super Bowl. We had tremendous offensive talent in this, back in the 70s on this Cardinal football team. When you think that Jackie Smith and Jim Hart and Mel Gray and the great offensive line and J.V. Kane and Terry Metcalf and Jim Otis and Steve Jones, we had tons of talent. And an innovative coach who I think should get serious consideration for the Pro Football Hall of Fame because of the way he revolutionized the passing game in the National Football League. It's just, we had to score 30-some points every week to win. It made for exciting football.
Vikings kept you at a couple.
Yeah, the Vikings, I remember one year we finished the season 11-3 and had to go on the road to play a playoff game because the Rams finished 12-2. And we had to go on the road. And you're going, wow, man, what do you have to do to? We finished 10-4 one year and didn't make the playoffs.
St. Louis jinx.
How do you? That's hard to do. Finish 10-4 and on the outside looking in.
That's true.
But that's the way the system was back then.
What's the frustration level like for a player when and some of the Rams players may be experiencing this as well? Now the guys who are the warriors that come to play every Sunday.
And there are a number of those on the Rams.
Absolutely. Where you're scratching and clawing every week and just can't quite get over the hump. That has to be exasperating.
Well, I remember in 1973, it was my third year in the league, and we were on our way to our third consecutive 4-9-1 season. And it was Don Coryell's first year in St. Louis. And I lost more football games my rookie year with the Cardinals than I'd lost my entire high school and collegiate career put together in those 9 losses. And then this was the third year of losing. And you really start to doubt yourself, and you really start to wonder if it's ever going to turn around. And you just need one game. You need one good thing to happen to you to start to believe. And we had to go down and play the Atlanta Falcons late in the '73 season. Jim Hart was hurt. And we knew the only way we could win was to just run the football. We threw the football 5 times. In an NFL football game, we attempted 5 passes. And we beat the Falcons, and we beat them handily down in Atlanta. And that gave us something. That's where our offensive line was born. And that gave us something to build on the entire offseason. And then we kick off '74 with 7 straight wins at this. But, that's what the Rams need. They just need one good thing to happen to them, and maybe they can take that and use that as a launching pad.
I'd like to say I remember that Falcons game, but I
didn't mean
born.
You hear
this is the last time I'll be here.
You hear all the stories about Conrad Dobler. And actually, I think at one point when he was with Buffalo, they had a cover story on Sports Illustrated, the dirtiest man in the league. I mean, what was it like playing with a guy like that? Obviously, he was as intense as anyone.
Yeah, he was intense, and he was a ferocious competitor. Conrad wanted to win more than he wanted to eat or breathe or anything else, and. I always pay Conrad the ultimate compliment, only when he's not around, because he can't handle compliments in person. Conrad was the type of a player, because of his attitude and because of his approach and his intensity. He made all the other players around him better. He was just one of those guys that played and practiced so hard that a lot of guys took a cue from Conrad and said, I need to take my game to a little higher level. Even if I don't have the skill level, I can play harder. I can run around and I can knock people down and I can raise a ruckus, which is what Conrad did. And you know what? Whether it was here in St. Louis or in New Orleans or in Buffalo, the 3 cities where he played, every one of their offensive lines was better after he got there than it was before.
Now, see, the thing I like to do if we have a guest, a couple weeks ago we had Ricky Horton of the Cardinals, and he kind of gave us a story about the clubhouse. Do you have one story, something inside the clubhouse that maybe fans would have never known, a practical joke, something that you saw happen that you'll never forget to this day? I mean, something pretty special, something on the road, something in a hotel room, something that just happened that, as a football player, professional guy, that no one else would know.
Well, we had a defensive end, John Sook, who found he found about a 2-foot garter snake one time at Forest Park, and he brought it to the locker room, and he lived with us in the locker room for the better part of a month. He was a good little guy, and we really took care of him. We really liked him, and one day I was going to be interviewed by Gary Bender, who was at Channel 4 at the time, and I had the snake in my hand, and it was cold outside. And Gary's leaned up next to me, and I'm real close to Gary, and I just kind of open my hand, and the snake takes off up my shoulder and goes on across and starts up Gary's shoulder. And then all of a sudden, Gary's interviewing me, and all of a sudden, this thing comes up in his field of vision, which is, and Gary almost jumped out of his skin. The bad news was it was about 20 degrees outside, and the poor snake, you know, they're cold-blooded, and that was a little much for him, and he got straight as a board. We ran him into the sauna. We took him into the sauna, and we're all in the sauna rubbing him, and he was fine, you know. And for all you animal rights people, he was just fine. And we had a little ceremony about a month later where we took him back to the park and let him go. He was. Good guy.
A pet snake, an inspiration.
Jesus, that's what we get. I don't know where that name came from, but oh, he made the trip around the locker room. Every guy in that locker room didn't like snakes. All of a sudden,
they liked him now.
Well, they
got to
meet him up close and personal.
What did the media guy do? I guess Gary Bender.
Gary?
Usually media guys are, but I know Gary's kind of a tougher media guy, but I know some of the other guys.
We started over. Because one minute Gary was there, and the next minute he wasn't.
And a long play.
It wasn't live. I wouldn't do that.
Oh, it wasn't live. That'd be better.
Well, it might have been better. It might have been. No, I don't have.
And we know that over your career you had a lot of injuries. So health-wise, how are you? I know you have a.
How am I doing?
A hip replacement coming up? Is that?
No, I've already had my hip replaced, and I'll probably end up having to have a knee replaced before it's over with. But you know what? Part of that is we did something back then that nobody would think about doing now. It would qualify as cruel and unusual punishment. We practiced every day on AstroTurf. We even had training camp. We even had 2-a-days on artificial surface. What we did with the Cardinals back in the 70s with training camp out at Lindenwood on artificial surface, and then practicing every day on the floor of Busch Stadium on that stuff, that's barbaric. There's not a player in the league that would put up with that now. And when I look back on it, you know, we just didn't know any better, and it damaged all of us. Conrad's already had a knee replaced. Tom Brahaney's already had a hip replaced, and none of us are even 50 yet.
That's awful.
It was a travesty.
And well, you know, I hope you do well because you got to cook, right? How's the food?
You know, I've got to get down there. In fact, they're firing up the broiler for me right now. I've got to get down there and get my apron on, Brad.
The most creative commercial. I'm thinking of a steak. I think how many people come up to you and say that?
Well, that's all you can hope for, is that you come up with something that people can remember, and you know, in a business where people restaurants come and go, and the average lifespan of a restaurant is about 9 or 10 months. We opened our restaurant at Westport Plaza in August of 1983. It's over 15 years old, and we opened downtown at Union Station in 1985. And we've just moved that restaurant over next to Busch Stadium there at 7th and Market. So we've been in the business a long time. we've sold a lot of steaks in this town.
That's great.
I'm thinking of millions of steaks.
Well, it's good that you've had such a great career with everything you've done. Monday Night Football looks great, sounds great. You work with great people, Al Michaels, one of the best, and the whole crew.
Yeah, we're real proud of what we do, and you know, it's an institution. It was an institution before I got there. It'll be an institution after I'm gone, and anybody who doesn't savor the time they're on that package is a fool.
Well, we really appreciate you coming in, and you've always...
Yeah, I got to leave now to get to the game by Monday.
It is a drive. You may have to get the Manning Cruiser out, but we do appreciate you very much. You've done this every year, and you come in and talk football with us, and we appreciate it very much.
What do I get for half a dozen? If this is fine.
We get you free McDonald's.
Oh, is that it? Man,
There's McDonald's down the street. It's very close.
No limit to your expenses.
You said your stuff is worth $10 million. That thing's 70 probably. $70.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Dan.
All right.